panelists with us. Dorab Supariwala, Sanjeev Bhasin, Sarvendra Srivastav, Shakti Patra, everybody joins in. That's the SGX Futures, 53.77. Surjit Bhalla will be with us in just a bit. Also, from the ground in Uttar Pradesh, Rahul Srivastav will be joining in just a bit. The first phase of polling in UP kicks off today. Gentlemen, thanks very much. Good morning, all of you. I just want to start by bringing Sanjeev in on the market. Let's just start with that and then we'll get to the UP polling in just a bit. First cut, Sanjeev. I mean, one of the very few cuts since the start of the year. Almost 20 up sessions and what about 8 odd down days? That's all that you've had. Sarvendra here earlier was pointing out that, I mean, till you get and break 5,200 on the Nifty, you eventually will go to about 6,000. So you'll do 6,000 first before anything else. How do you think about that? Let's start with that.
Yeah, morning, Prashant. You know, I think 6,000 would be a little bit far-fetched right now. I would see, you know, this resistance around 5,400, 5,450, where actually we complete a 20% retracement from the lows of 20th December to be exact, would be a little bit of resistance and where you could see some pressure. So, on the longer term, definitely we are looking at levels which are higher, closer to 6,000 like Sarvendra said. But in the shorter term, I think, you know, given the present environment, the speed of the rally, it is prudent to be, you know, booking some profit here. Or alternatively being hedged because you don't want to miss out on some of the profit you have accumulated. Nifty actually would not be the exact benchmark. There are the other sector stocks which have outperformed. So we continue to be bullish, but we would say we are looking for some events, particularly Greece, as you know, anything positive there, we would be looking to book profits aggressively. So I think the flavor or the low-hanging fruits have been plucked. It is time to be a little bit prudent and protect your profits now.
Shakti, what's the latest out of Greece? You're a keen Greek follower.
I don't understand Greek, but I think some 50 guys went and threw some stones at the president, the prime minister. I don't know who the prime minister is right now. It keeps changing, and I think Sanjeev last year said 2011, towards the end of 2011, said that in 2012 we won't be talking about Greece anymore. It's actually surprising that we started today morning talking about Greece. Sanjeev, the same things continue, right? Since 2009, late 2009.
No, but what's happening? I understand there is a meeting today, which will consider whether private bondholders should be made to, suffer the voluntary haircut.
Even 10% are not willing to buy that entire argument or buy the voluntary. I mean, it's not voluntary, first of all. They were pushed into saying that it's a voluntary
70% haircut. That's what I mean. That's what we talk about.
And the deadline keeps on getting extended. You have the Greece deadline getting pushed on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So no
Dr. Surjit Bhalla is with us as well. Let me bring him into the discussion. I mean, we've not spoken about Greece for a while. It's starting to come back into a bit of focus. Surjit, your thoughts? I mean, are we moving to
I think Greece is an X story. You know, it's dragging on in terms of the fiscal and there's responsibility. But I think the market correctly feels that that solution is there. Nothing's going to happen anytime soon to rock the boat, if you will. So I don't think, you know, there will be ups and downs in terms of whether some agreement has been reached or not reached. But if you're looking for any news event from there, to upset the apple cart, I don't think so. You know, so one might be, you know, I think the Greece resolution is there. So I'm not looking for a Greece resolution, if you will, to book profits or anything like that. I think it's a non-story, quite honestly.
In fact, somebody said yesterday, I think Dow Jones, that Portugal is only in the wings waiting. Once Greece goes, there's Portugal on the way. So it's not that the story is going to be over. There's other guys in the wings still.
No, but Surjit is implying that Greece is fixed. So you're saying Portugal is on the way to be fixed? Or?
No, Portugal is on the way to getting unfixed.
Unfixed.
So after Greece's problem with Portugal.
I don't think so. I mean, look, when they looked at this whole problem, which they obviously all of us have looked at it, and especially the Europeans, they looked at it as a package deal. It was always a package deal. Greece, Portugal, Spain, Ireland, and each has different sets of problems, but the biggest problem was Greece. So I don't think, you know, and the short sellers have been burnt, especially on, you know, there was a time when they were riding high in terms of selling European debt. and they've disappeared in the woodwork. And I don't think they're going to be growling anytime soon.
Dr. Bala, the
at least on Europe they won't be growling.
At 1400%. I mean, the short sellers are making a lot of money. 1400%.
On what?
On the Greece 1 year.
On Greek, what? Yeah, exactly. How much trade is taking place? I mean, you know, it's a notional price, and I don't think there are too many buyers or sellers at that price. So it may be trading 1400%. Maybe it was 1395 the day before. So I mean, it's not.
By the way, Greece, I think, is
you know, once you get
charts yesterday.
seriously, once you get into the hyperinflation zone, and this is the hyperinflation zone, there is no economic calculation. There is no fundamental calculation. There is no technical calculation. It's just there in the stratosphere. But coming back to the serious question of what about the rest of it? It is not the case, certainly it's not my case, and I don't think it's anybody's case, that the problems in Europe are over.
Right.
But I think it is the case that several people believe, including myself, that they are well on the way to being resolved. If there is growth in the world, and the US data certainly suggested that we have started off 2012, world growth has started off on a very, very good footing. If there is growth in the world, this continues, the European problem will be less and less, and the solutions will be more and more. So I think, you know, for something to go awry with Greece or with Portugal, you need an external shock outside of the US, outside of Europe, and that can only be, if you will, the Middle East, oil, nuclear,
Right.
one of those things.
Right. You know, but
remember also a
just
lot
to-
of elections coming up this year.
Right. Okay. Just a quick
There
point.
is a-
You know, you
yeah.
had QE1, which was largely US. I mean, US Fed. I mean, that was US Fed, and the markets rallied after that. Effects faded off. Markets came off promptly. You had QE2, which was again, I mean, the Fed. You had a big global rally. I mean, everything moved up, and then everything sold off once the effects faded off, presumably. Now you have. I mean, you don't have QE3, but you have the Europeans acting very aggressively. So you can categorize that as, I mean, LTRO and all sorts of government funding for, I mean, local bonds and that kind of stuff. Again, you've got 2012 starting with most risk assets starting to move up. I mean, why wouldn't the earlier, you know, sort of, why wouldn't recent history repeat itself? Essentially, at some point, the marginal utility of these kind of actions sort of starts to go into negative, and I mean everything starts to sell off again.
Remember, okay, good point. Look, remember what was the European problem? The European problem was that the market felt that there were several nations, Greece amongst them, that would default. That would be a catastrophe. It would default, something a developed country hasn't done.
Right.
Argentina did do it 10 years ago. So this was a catastrophe facing the world,
Right.
Especially facing Europe. And then it was that there'd be contagion. It would just not be Greece defaulting, it'd be Portugal defaulting, it perhaps would be Spain defaulting, and everything else. Okay? That is out. So therefore, history repeating itself. I mean,
Right,
we
okay.
don't have, we are not facing.
Right.
Now,
So you're
what
basi-
the Europeans have done,
Right.
first of all, the interest rates were very high, and they were very, very reluctant to add liquidity to the system to bring, if you will, bond yields down. When you bring bond yields down, you increase confidence, and vice versa. So in other words, the very same Europe, okay, the very same situation, previously you thought they were going to default, and you had Italian bonds and other bonds trading at above 7%. Now the ECB is giving them loans at 1%. So I think there is confidence that there won't be a default, and Europe as we know it, the Eurozone will not collapse, will not cease to exist. That's a big, big picture out of the window.
So basically,
So
you're saying
the downside-
right? Got that. You're saying there won't be a big sovereign/financial accident, right? That's what you're saying. That's what everybody was worried of. That's ruled out now. Well, growth comes back, when it comes back, all that. I mean, so that'll take time.
So we're getting back to traditional. So on this show and others, I think we're going to get back to traditional discussions. We've had, 4 years, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, about the great financial crisis and the unusual events.
Right.
I think very soon, by very soon I mean 3 months to 6 months, our discussions will be where are interest rates headed, where is growth headed, and back to normal. unless you have, if you will, some, as I said, external shock.
Right.
We are in the path towards normality. I would say another 6 months, the discussions on this show will be very different
let's hope so.
than what we're having today and what we had last year.
I mean, Dr. Bala, the only reason the yields are low is because ECB is buying the bonds. So, I mean, if that's the new normal, probably it can continue.
Look, I really do think, and you know, we will continue to discuss, and there'll be continue to be disagreements. I just think we are slowly and steadily approaching the old normal. Now, with a difference. Basically, the developed countries' growth rate is ratcheted down by about half a percentage point, which is not small. Okay, for them, when their normal growth is 2.5 to 3, and you ratchet it down by 0.5%, that's a 25% reduction in the growth rate. So I'm not saying that basically they will continue to bound further. However, balancing that is that the emerging world outside of China will see a steady acceleration in growth rates, or should see a steady acceleration in growth rates, such that world growth is balanced around 4%, 4% real, which is quite a large amount. Now, that is the new normal, if you will. Developed countries growing at about 0.5 percentage point less, and developing countries growing at about 1 percentage point more, and China gradually going down to about a 6 to 7% growth rate over the next 5 years. Now, that's a long story. We may not be around there in 5 years, but I just think that's the new normal. And the problems that we have faced, I think, are coming to an end. The new problems that we faced are coming to an end.
All right. I want to extrapolate that and come back to the markets and bring in Sanjeev as well. Sanjeev, we're talking about things improving worldwide for ourselves as well. Growth will start to pick up. Aside of that, right now in terms of asset allocation, if you have to keep it at that, Mohammed Al-Araeen yesterday spoke about the fact that in equity markets particularly, if you've given an allocation of about 20%, you want to be half of that right now. In all other asset classes, be it gold, be it crude, that's something you should have in your portfolio as well. Right now, would you believe that asset allocation requires you to probably focus more on other commodities instead of equities completely, and maybe reduce a little bit of allocation there?
Yeah, Davina, firstly, what Mohammed Al-Araeen says is more related to the US and Europe, where equity is a large component of asset classes. In India, it's the reverse. We hardly have any households which own equity. And the last 3 years, you've seen mutual funds have been totally a disaster. So I've always held the view that, asset allocation for any individual has to be the key. So if you owned a part of gold, which for us is only emotional value, where by default we had what we had, for us, goddess Lakshmi came in the shape of our wife, who brought along the gold and preserved it. It was not by our sensible doing of preserving gold. And now you have gold at 27,000, and everyone talking in hindsight that gold should be an asset allocation. For years it was at 3,000. Same is the case with equities, which I've held. That last year was an aberration. You had to make your best choice of stocks and make a proportion of that. Right. Now, for this year onwards, I would say your asset allocation on equity should be much more, say 50% more than you normally did.
Right.
Because the valuations and growth is back.
Right.
So assets, and get out of bonds and whatever your other asset classes are, because yields have reached their peak. So you will only tend to make money more on the asset allocation of equities. Gold, as it is in a bloated state, so there is the correlation that gold might correct right now with defenses being out of flavor. That could be a short-term aberration, but in time to come, again, gold will get back its value. So, rightly saying, we have to see where our asset allocation lies.
Yeah, got it. Okay, so that's basically Sanjeev's thoughts there. I'm going to sort of shift the discussion. We've got about 5.5 minutes to go for the pre-open session. Polling for the first phase as far as elections in UP kicks off today. So we are shifting base and the topic of discussion to that. NDTV's Rahul Srivastav also is joining us right now from Ground Zero. He's in Uttar Pradesh. Dorab and Surjit are, of course, going to be joining the are going to trail the election yatra
next week. This is the first stage. The voting is Sanjeev, is Rahul on?
Rahul is
well,
on, yes.
Central UP and Tara is the area that's going to the polls. There are 55 seats. In the last election, actually, the Congress and the BJP had just 3 and 4 of those seats. But in the Lok Sabha elections, the Congress did very well there. Now, Lok Sabha election, people do vote for different reasons in Lok Sabha than from Vidhan Sabha. If the Congress has to do well, it has to do well in this segment. In the Vidhan Sabha, Lok Sabha elections, it won 29 of these segments, almost half, versus only 3 in the actual Vidhan Sabha election. There is a gentleman called Beni Prasad Verma, who is a Kurmi leader. He actually is leading the Congress thrust in this area to to try and get more seats, because if the Congress has to hit even 50, this is the zone where they run so badly, they have to do well. Mayawati got 32 of those in the last assembly elections. She has to have a majority, she has to do well too. In fact, except for the BJP, there's a big zone of fight for everybody. Everybody has to try and get 20-25 of those 55 seats. And as I said, there are 1.7 crore voters, which is the number of voters in a small European country. And there is just one of the 6 zones, 7 phases in which UP votes.
Yeah.
Rahul, tell us a bit of what's happening on the ground.
Dorab, it's raining on the ground all
How
across
nice.
eastern Uttar Pradesh and in Lucknow. It's raining, and that's where perhaps we can derive our own new political calculations that whenever it rains, voter turnout is low, and whenever voter turnout is low, it is the committed voter which comes out, not people like us who come out and vote in cities. And perhaps that always benefits committed voters, means people have parties like the BSP. The BSP will really hope that it does well here. If you look at the tally last elections, it was slightly lesser than 1/3 of its seats. 1/5 of the seats came from this region. And one good reason why the BSP can hope that despite Congress doing very well in the last Lok Sabha elections is that though Beni Prasad Verma is now with the Congress, is a Minister of Steel, but somewhere there is a lot of resentment in the Congress, because eventually what they are saying, say for example the Barabanki seat, in Barabanki the Congressmen are saying 5 of the people who have got seats out of the 6 seats in Barabanki, they are ex-Samajwadi Party turncoats, and there is a bit of resentment, and perhaps in fighting a poor organizational skills, perhaps that might dent the Congress, but certainly one can say that the fight in this region is still between the BSP and the Samajwadi Party, with the Congress hoping to make gains.
Fine. What is the, I mean, how the Samajwadi Party doing? Because they, for them too, if they have to become the largest single party, they too have to significantly improve their prospects in this region, because they only got 16 seats last time. What are they looking like?
Dorab, I've travelled with Mulayam Singh and some Akhilesh Yadav in this region. One element which I realized that better than last time in 2009 was that there is no Kalyan Singh factor working for them, against them. Kalyan Singh, perhaps that factor did really hurt them. There are several areas like Kesarganj and others which are extremely Muslim dominated, and that's where the Samajwadi Party had lost severely in the last elections. The Samajwadi Party is hoping that they will make gains because of the minority factor, but one problem for them in this area is the Kurmi vote. Though Mulayam Singh Yadav is called an OBC leader, but again predominantly he can be seen as a Yadav leader and has not got the support of the other backward castes apart from the Yadavs. And that is why even if he does get the Muslim vote, where does he add to the Muslim vote? That is, the Muslim plus is a bit of a problem for him. That is why he can hope to make gains at the cost of the BSP. But can he really swing the scales in this region? Perhaps that's going to be difficult. One can certainly say that if Kurmis are going to dominate the vote in this region and minority vote, then perhaps the Congress has something to celebrate.
You know, JDU of Nitish Kumar is fighting separately here from the BJP. Obviously, this is again a Kurmi area, which is a Nitish Kumar area. What are they going to do there, you think?
See, this is what has been the talking point, that how the JDU and the BJP could not arrive at an election alliance in Uttar Pradesh. Perhaps might hurt, but the JDU was very clear that it does not want, because the BJP will be mixing the Mandir issue often again, and that's where they didn't want to disturb Nitish Kumar's government in Bihar. Yes, the BJP somewhere is hoping that the Kurmi vote which the JDU will attract might actually help the BJP and might actually hurt the Congress. Because if you look at the BJP game in several constituencies across Uttar Pradesh, it's not just only to ensure that that the BJP wins the seats. There is other layers of politics which happens in Uttar Pradesh, and one of them could well be that if there is a Kurmi, JDU attracted Kurmi vote, maybe that will hurt the Congress. So there is perhaps a second layer underlying political game plan going on, and that's where the BJP might be hoping that the Congress might be hurt if there is a JDU candidate, Kurmi's vote getting divided.
Rahul, isn't it strange that for the first time probably in any election, no candidate who's likely to be Chief Minister is standing for election. Neither Mulayam, nor his son, nor Mayawati. None of them is standing for election. Is that a bit strange?
Yes, that's perhaps something very unique, that Rahul Gandhi is a star campaigner. He is not contesting. Mayawati is already a member of the Legislative Council. There is a bit of a doubt whether Mulayam will be Chief Minister or Akhilesh will be Chief Minister, or what might be the final arrangement. And the BJP does not even have a single star campaigner. If you thought that Narendra Modi could have been one, he is still sulking over the inclusion of one gentleman into the BJP's national executive. So if you look at it, there is no single clear Chief Ministerial candidate. But then the factor that might help Mayawati perhaps is that she is the lone clear candidate for the Chief Minister's job. And perhaps in Uttar Pradesh, the Chief Ministerial, people vote for the Chief Ministerial candidate than for the party really. And if that is why, over the last 20 years, if you look at it, anybody who had a very clear Chief Ministerial, strong candidate has benefited. That's what has benefited Mulayam and Mayawati also.
Okay, Rahul, thank you very much. Have a good day and take a big umbrella with you.
All right, thanks very much, Rahul, for that. Appreciate it very much. And of course, we'll get you regular updates. It's just the first day the polling kicks off today, but important to track. I'm just going to take 60 seconds and I'm going to get back to Surjit and Dorab here to understand their thoughts and what they're watching out for. But two things, the pre-open session and Bharti numbers, both are out. The pre-open has started out higher, 25 on the Nifty. Bharti earnings, I think, are just about starting to come out right now. Third quarter profits at 1,100 crores or so. Those are consolidated numbers from Bharti. 1,011 crores from Bharti coming in right now. These are consolidated set of numbers. We'll get you the poll as well and how the actual compares against what the...
It's in fact worse off than the poll. Poll was about 1,364 crores for PAT, and they've come in with just about 1,000 odd crores in terms of Q3 PAT. 1,027 was the last quarter-on-quarter growth consolidated basis. This time around, the expectation was slightly higher for them. A 32% jump in profitability was what was expected for this. In fact, on a sequential basis, declined from 1,024. Sales numbers have not yet come in, but the expectation was a 6.5% bump up in sales as well to come in at about 18,410. Those numbers have not yet come in. Key factors were going to be the EBITDA margins for Q3 at 34.9. We'd watch out whether there's been a squeeze on the EBITDA margins this time around as well. Remember, forex losses was a component that we'd factored in of 300 crores while making that estimation. We'll wait and watch as to what the overall forex loss for Bharti has turned out to be. Remember, from Idea's Q3 numbers, expectations from Bharti took a little bit of an uptick with the kind of ARPUs that went up. The revenue per minute, which also went up for Idea Cellular. Bharti Airtel, remember, when the licenses were cancelled, was also on an uptick because of the lack of impact that this particular company would be having on that.
Profits, Devina, are significantly low. 350 crores below expectations. I mean, usually there isn't that much of a... I mean, if there's a beat, the beat isn't very large. If there's a miss, the miss isn't very large. But I mean, if you go with the numbers, I mean, 1,011 compared to expectations of 1,364, I mean, it's a huge disappointment coming in from Bharti Airtel. Unless, of course, as has happened over the last couple of quarters, I mean, once in a while there is this one large extraordinary which nobody factored in, and then the numbers kind of fall back into place. It's happened before, but on the face of it, I mean, it's probably the largest miss that I've seen from coming in from Bharti. But just on the face of it, right now we don't have other details. Revenues at 18,477 crores, which seem in line with expectations. I mean, 18,410 was the street expectation, so I mean, not very much there. Let's just pull up the stock. I mean, we got the stock in the pre-open session, so you should be able to see what it is doing. Of course, you'll get firm prices at about 908, 915 we go into the normal market session, but 373, 374 nearly on Bharti. That's 1 1/3% lower on Bharti Airtel. 5 what, six
Watch it
rupees
for the
lower.
African business also, because you know, they could also be a surprise there on the African side of the business, particularly the Zen business. EBITDA for the African business was expected at about 1,430 odd crores. Revenues expected to take a slight bit of a move on the upside on a quarter-on-quarter basis. EBITDA margins for Bharti have taken a bit of a squeeze, 32.2. Remember, EBITDA margins that we were focusing on and we had probably expected was about 34.9. This is a squeeze on the EBITDA margins, well as we had expected an expansion. So on both accounts, on PAT as well as EBITDA margins, a disappointment there. We'll wait and watch out for other factors like traffic. The ARPU this time around for Bharti was seen down by 4% on a quarter-on-quarter basis. And African business, that chunk will also be in focus in terms of revenues, EBITDA growth there, and what's been happening to the business situation overall. Bharti Airtel now down about 1.5%.
Although for the quarter for which these numbers are out, I mean, they've got first time actually in the history of telecom companies tariff increases. I mean, this quarter and the last quarter, September ended quarter. So pricing has improved. I mean, for the first time ever. And now, of course, there's again talk that prices will start to come off and all of that. Maybe not with license cancellations. Incumbents, large incumbents, will get some more pricing power. But I mean, that's looking ahead into the future. Third quarter Africa revenues coming in at $1.04 billion US. So we'll put, some of those African numbers in perspective as well. Keep a track of that, but we'll come back to that in a bit. 22, 23 points on the Nifty, 5357, but 7-point change in the Sensex, 17,629, 908 we get firm prices. Just to come back to that UP bit before we finish the topic off, both Dorab and Surjit are heading off to Uttar Pradesh on the election trail. I just want both of you to sort of comment on what is the one thing that you are going to be watching out for, or looking for, or wanting to hear. Let's start with you, Dorab. I mean, what are you picking? I mean, what do you want to pick up in that sense?
Frankly, you go with an open mind. You don't know what's happening. You read newspaper reports. You speak to people on the ground at election rallies. You listen to leaders. So I think you just try and pick up the buzz, what the local issues are, because very often there are no issues. I'm voting for him because he's a Kurmi, and that ends the story. Or I'm voting for him because it's Mulayam's party. So you're trying to see if what is that's moving the electorate. Are there some undercurrents that you haven't spotted? Very often you just get a feel of what's happening. So when you try and understand the election, you then can try and explain it better. This party is leading in this area, the areas you've gone to, you then say, look, we spotted this feeling there, and that is what we feel is the reason why that was happening. You try and understand the election better. That's why I go. Ask Surjit why he does.
It's a large state, a lot of traveling. I mean,
yes.
A lot of traveling.
Yeah.
You want to come in, Surjit? I mean, what are you watching out for?
In terms of what one is looking for, I mean, I agree with Dorab that you're trying to see what the pulse of the people is and where they're likely to vote. But I'm particularly interested in the big shift that took place in the votes, in the Lok Sabha votes. So what are the reasons? Is it the case that it'll be more like the Lok Sabha election as far as the Congress party as well as the BSP is concerned, or will it be more like the previous assembly poll? And the reasons thereof, I don't have a clue, but the Congress, as we know, got about 100 seats in the Lok Sabha poll, assembly seats, and got about 20 in the previous assembly election. That's a huge jump. That's a huge shift. And what are the reasons? So in other words, if they are voting for Mayawati, why did they vote for the Congress in the Lok Sabha election, and vice versa? So that's, I think, of key interest. I don't know the answers, but that's what one is looking for.
Do you think it's possible that when we talk about elections in UP, there's even a hope in hell that instead of caste, Kurmi or OBC or minority and majority, maybe corruption or inflation, that could be an issue this time? I mean, all the Anna Hazare movement, I mean, some repercussions of that?
I don't really know, because corruption isn't, there are issues and then there are election issues. If corruption is an issue and all four of us are seen to be equally corrupt, then it's not a voting issue. Voting issues where I can tell one party clearly apart from another. And very often the corruption, the guy at the bottom end faces is from the local patwari, from the sarpanch. He doesn't face the A Raja corruption.
Yeah.
He faces corruption, and then he can't tell the difference, because that man who was Congress last time becomes SP now, will become BSP next week, and BJP the year after. So he goes, they all, it's a business. If you look at it as a business, you will not have this problem. We all think it's politics. Politics is a business. So I go with wherever the market is. If this guy buys me out, I go with him. I mean, we are making it a profession, which is not the right thing to do in this country.
So they'll still vote their caste instead of casting their votes.
Yes, they do vote the caste, not only, but it's a very, very important factor, despite all the things that people in the city say, unless you have a star. Now when, say, a Sonia Gandhi stands, or Mulayam Singh Yadav stands, then caste doesn't matter. You vote for a star, and one of the reasons why the Congress did so well, in my opinion, in the Lok Sabha, is that, you have Sonia Gandhi, Rahul Gandhi, Satish Sharma. So in those 4 or 5 parliamentary seats, you win almost all the assembly segments. In fact, if you look at those 90-odd seats, segments that the Congress won in the Lok Sabha, most of them were in the area of Awadh, where the Gandhis stand, and their home is.
What's the chance of any of the BJP stars? I mean, the Binay Katiyar, Uma Bharti, are they all over? I mean,
No, they are stars, but they are stars in their constituencies. They are not. I mean, Binay Katiyar is not a pan-UP star. He was after the demolition of the masjid, but not today. Uma Bharti probably is the star in the BJP. She is a local star. Both the stars are local stars, the ladies. I don't think so, not really. I don't think across
Okay,
UP.
we'll get on with that discussion. Dorab and Surjit will be going on the trail there, the election trail. We'll get in more details then, and what exactly they're picking up from the on-ground situation. Let's move back into the markets then. For the Nifty, we are up 8 odd points. For the Sensex, we're up 11 odd points. Bharti Airtel numbers disappointing, the stocks down. Let's get an initial reaction. Sanjeev, Bharti Airtel, on the face of it, a big disappointment in PAT. They've got their ARPUs also, which have come in lesser than what we'd expected. Almost 190 was what we were expecting. They've come in at 184 odd. What's your initial take on Bharti and the African EBITDA also? Very, very marginal move up.
Yeah, I think Devina, the price action is telling me that the price was far in ahead of what the numbers are showing. And like, Prashant just pointed out, we had the best pricing power in the last 2 quarters. Also, I think what I read on the news is the FX component is actually positive, which we were expecting to be a big drag. So there must have been some tax provisioning, but the numbers are leaving a lot of, much to be desired. On the other hand, because of this recent cancellation of licenses, I think any fall will be made a reason to buy, because people will again have focused Bharti as their main strength in the telecoms. But we continue to be overweight on RCom despite that, and we think any decline in RCom should be a better, will give you much more return in the next 6 months.
Sarvendra, you want to come in?
Yeah, I agree to what I agree to the fact that RCom would be a definitely much better buy in terms of the risk reward and in terms of the returns that it can give, probably what Bharti can do. And Bharti, that monthly trend line, if you can put the chart which I showed earlier, unless and until Bharti is being able to cross that, I don't think any medium term strength would come into Bharti. So RCom will always be my pick in the telecom pack.
So the ARPU was down, and now these companies. Did you read yesterday? The regulator now wants to regulate
Tariffs.
the rate tariffs.
Yeah.
I mean, unless there is
it
collusion.
possible? Is it?
The question is, I mean, what is the Monopoly Commission for? If I'm not making money and I want to make more money, and I'm going to put up my rates, what is your problem? If this, uncompetitive behavior is not having dominant power, but the misuse of the dominant power is the way, Competition Commission would take it into account. And, we have the lowest tariffs in the world. I can't imagine putting up the tariffs a bit so that...
tariff wars where all these companies went...
Yeah, but tariffs go up and down. That's what free competition is all about. Surjit, do you agree?
I can't possibly disagree on that score. But I want to look at the 1,000 versus 1,300. There must be some extraordinary expenditure.
Yeah.
Otherwise, such a big gap for such a big international company is somewhat inexplicable. So I think one needs to find out what really happened. But as far as collusion, we do have the lowest rates, and I think we have to look out for the fact that there isn't a mini cartel to drive up the rates. It should be determined obviously by competition, and part of the reason we have low rates is maybe some of the costs are lower than elsewhere.
All right, we still don't have confirmation. I mean, Sanjeev just briefly mentioned there might have been a forex gain. I mean, we don't have confirmation of that, and it would be extremely unusual if they actually land up with a forex gain with the way the rupee has actually moved in the October to December period. So, I mean, I don't think we've got that number yet. We've got the rest of it. And of course, and I think that would, I mean, the street was expecting a 300 crore loss on the forex front. So if they post a gain, I mean, I don't know how it would work out. Then there has to be something else which probably, yeah, took a bite out of these numbers.
Africa is also in line in terms of their revenues and in terms of their EBITDA margins. Africa has also come out in line, so there has to be another component which has led to these.
Or not. All these numbers are plain bad. I mean, for some other reason. All right, we've got some details, and this is how it flows as far as Bharti earnings are concerned. They have a forex gain of 13 crores, 13 crores. I don't know how, but they reported a forex gain of 13 crores or so. We'll get you details in a bit. But I mean, so essentially what it means is that numbers are bad. I mean, there's no other. I mean, there's no way to explain these numbers away. If they had a big forex loss greater than expected, you could blame it on the forex front. But these numbers are much below street expectations, and there's no one-off to kind of account for the disappointment. This is what's happened. Traffic growth has been at about 1.5% in the quarter gone by. October to December, traffic growth has been 1.5%. Estimate for traffic growth was about 4%. So that's the big disappointment. Idea's traffic grew 7% for the same period, October to December. Bharti is down 1.5%. As a result, minutes of usage is down 1% for Bharti. Estimates were for them to grow that number 2% plus. And in turn, ARPUs have, of course, disappointed. ARPUs have come in at 187 odd rupees or so compared to about 200 rupees, which the street was kind of factoring in. So operationally, the numbers are weak. I mean, no other way to put it. And they've reported a 13 crore forex gain, which we'll get clarity on in just a bit. Arijit Banerjee, I'm being told, is with us right now. We can go to him, I think in, all right, we can go to him. Arijit, good morning. Forex gain, let's start with that. I mean, any explanation of how they've done that? And also just some of the other operational details that you can pick up.
Prashant, not too good results coming in for Bharti. Profits, of course, if you look at compared to the previous quarter or the same quarter last year, actually down. In fact, profits this year compared to the last quarter are down almost 22%. Bharti, of course, giving reasons for why. What they are saying is that they have factored in the 3G license fee amortization, which is about 164 crore rupees. Interest costs, which are higher by 116 crore rupees. And also higher tax provision. They are saying that the effective tax rate at the moment is working out to be about 32.5% for the company, and that is the reason they are giving for their lower profits. One, of course, very interesting factor coming in, Prashant, is the fact that after many quarters, for the first time, actually Bharti seeing a rise in its average revenue per user, which is ARPU. It's a parameter of how much revenue they are earning from each user. That going up by about 4 rupees. So it's at 187 rupees now compared to what it was last quarter, where it was about 183 rupees. So that seems to be the only positive coming out. Apart from that, not too many positives in the sense. It seems that the tariff hike seems to be slowly taking effect. Africa operations still making losses. The losses this quarter being at about 260 crore rupees. Back to you.
Interesting, because you know we've been thanks Arijit for that. When we were talking about the interest expenses and when we spoke about the rupee depreciation in the last quarter, we had pointed out that Bharti has got to most of its foreign currency denominated loans, which would get impacted and the interest burden would rise. So it would actually move against Bharti in terms of interest payments, which again have.
But you know, in Africa there are 11 countries that they work with. I mean, apart from the foreign debt, some of the revenue that they make is in, I mean, a lot of different currencies, so we don't know how that played out as well. But that amortization bit is interesting. 164 crores is what Arijit mentioned for the 3G, the price that they paid. So they're amortizing it over a period of time, and that is 164 crores for the quarter, which has gone by. The ARPUs, which Arijit was mentioning, was year on year compared to the same quarter last year. Sequentially, there's a bit of a drop, which has come in. Stocks recovered a little bit, 367, 368. Sujit, I'm sure you own the stock. I mean, any thoughts? Keeping these numbers aside, if they don't make that much of a difference to you, how do you think about Telecom and Bharti, the leader there?
It's a tough call, on this industry. It has been obviously a big time growth industry, and I think there is, I see limited upside in telecommunications. But there is something compelling about RelianceCom, which is way down. So I would think that there should be some gravitational force taking you towards Reliance Communications relative to Bharti. But again, there is a, if you will, a lid. The only reason one would favor RCom is because it's been beaten down so much, and the point is that the scandal is behind us and will soon approach normality, soon meaning over the next few months. But as a sector, I think, you know, we've got, I think one of the sectors that may soon come back in favor is the software industry because of, if you will, growth in the West. And then obviously domestically there's infrastructure as well as banks. So, you know, in that spectrum, telecommunications, not much on the horizon.
All right. Those were some of the stocks there.
There's a flash, Devina. I just wanted to mention that ED has registered a money laundering case against the Marans. That's news coming in just now. There was some you know, street talk going on over the last couple of days. We'll get Madhu Bharati, our correspondent, there on the phone line against Dayanidhi Maran. I mean, that's coming in right now. So
That's to do with the telecom.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
case.
Not Kalanidhi Maran, which is the other part.
yeah,
of
that's
this.
the other. Yeah, this is the telecom tangle there. So that's news coming in right now, attributed to the PTI, and we'll have Madhu on the phone line.
But against Kalanidhi Maran too, in 2G
So
case.
both
the
Kalanidhi
brothers.
and Dayanidhi? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So, I mean, pull up Sun, if you want to just look at the market impact. There's Sun TV, there's SpiceJet, and you'd get a sense of, I mean, what both those are doing. I mean, bad news.
Yesterday there was something about SpiceJet having problems. One of the papers reported that its financials are
the number, they
somewhat
reported a large
suspect.
loss, and the
Yeah.
auditor said that that's eating away into
Correct.
the net worth.
Net worth, that's right.
That's, but we spoke to the Sun TV management yesterday, and they said, I mean, we've actually increased stake in SpiceJet.
Yeah.
The only reason we can't buy more is because the regulator bars us from doing
Fine.
only, I mean, you
Yeah.
know, there's a cap. So they seem pretty committed.
Some more details, in fact, from the Enforcement Directorate. The first FIR was registered against the Union Telecom Institute, Dayanidhi Maran and Kalanidhi Maran, and they've alleged that Maran brothers received 550 crores in illegal gratification, punishable under sections of the PMLA and the FEMA. Under these provisions, the ED can even match and attach properties of Sun TV and the Marans. So we're getting some more details. 550 crores is what they're talking about. Money laundering case against both Dayanidhi Maran as well as Kalanidhi
This of
Maran.
course also means more political uncertainty because the
And they're
DMK is
saying
going to get very upset with
Second
this.
case pertained to the NDA regime when BJP's Pramod Mahajan was the telecom minister as well. So
Yeah.
they're digging up something else as well
Yes.
on the same.
Yeah.
So 2.5% lower on Sun TV. SpiceJet also seeing repercussions of the same in this charges coming in there from the ED. Both stocks down about 2 to 2.5%
See,
each.
one of the papers reported yesterday, CBI was looking into the NDA era of telecom very closely. I presume this is the
This
first
is
fallout of
yeah.
that.
This would be the local enforcement team
No, central.
in central.
No,
This
no,
would
it's,
be-
I mean, maybe the local wing, but central, it's
Right, okay.
Enforcement
Okay.
Director, which is
Okay,
central.
all right, okay.
And now after Maxis and the investigation from there, this is another thing which has brought them into the
That's
forefront
right,
with
that's right.
a lot of bad publicity
Yeah.
there for the Marans, and the implications, as you can see, on the stock prices as well. 2.5% on Sun TV, 2.5% on SpiceJet. Well, we'll have to wrap it up here for the markets as well. We're seeing a flat move. Nifty is up 6 odd points, Sensex up 28 points. Dr. Surajit Bhalla, Dorab, Sarvendra, Sanjeev and Shakti, thanks very much for joining in.